Hey, thanks for tuning in to Down the Mine Shaft with Triz. I am he. Today I wanted to talk about something that I've kind of on and off thought about over the past few years. So you know when the intro of Star Trek comes on, it says something about, space, the final frontier. I was thinking about that. And the days of frontiers are gone on planet Earth. Yes, space is the final frontier, but it's not attainable for everybody. And the stuff that you need to get out to space is astronomical. I mean, I forget the exact number, but it costs like a bunch of money just to get 1 pound of water into space, right? Like a lot of money. I forget, probably should have looked it up. But so I got to thinking, like, can you imagine living back in time, whether it was the 1700s or during medieval times or during the Roman Empire or before, where there was actual frontiers? And the idea of what a frontier is has changed as we moved on. So at one point of time, just whatever was across the river may have been a frontier, right? But as Europe settled and ate through the resources, the conquistadors and English settlers and explorers, they transversed across the globe. So even during the time of the Roman Empire, like, the Romans looked at the British Isles as a very scary place. The fog was mysterious to them. I mean, of course they had fog in Rome, but it was how it settled on the island of Britain, and they would hear all of these stories about these giants, with long blonde hair, 8, 12 feet tall. And so the soldiers, as disciplined as they were, and they were the most ever, it still would be in the back of your mind. It was the same with the German, the Black Force of Germany. These places were surrounded with these lores and legends that before the soldiers even got to them, it was, weighing on their mind hugely. So fast forward a bit, when Columbus came, that was probably, it was a frontier, and then we started the 13 colonies, and, in the grand scheme of things, the 1800s wasn't that long ago. I mean, we're the same humans as back then. I mean, we're the same humans that watched the gladiatorial battles in ancient Rome. I mean, and evolutionary speaking, I don't even think it's worded like that. Yeah. I guess I'll use that. Evolutionary speaking, we are the same human beings as the Romans. So you get guys like Lewis and Clark that, they decide, okay, well, let's take a canoe and take this river and see where this goes. Now, at that point in time, the United States, it stopped at the Mississippi River. They didn't have any idea what was beyond that. And the fact that they end up taking a pregnant Native woman is insane to me. But so Lewis and Clark, I think Clark was the one. He was more of a scientist. He wanted to, see all the new fauna and anything that he could bring back with him that was new. He would. I mean, he's the first. That's the first documented case of groundhogs, certain butterflies, and the fact that some of these natives, they might have been the first white people that these natives have ever seen. But there was also the mountain men. So fur felt hats were all the rage in Europe and throughout the aristocracy of Europe. So they would rely on beaver pelts to be trapped over here in the New World. So you had these mountain men. I'll get back to Lewis and Clark in a second. You had these mountain men that would go out, usually by themselves, with just their ammo and their weapon and some provisions, and that's it. I mean, it was insane. But Lewis and Clark, I mean, these guys, they endured frostbite, exhaustion, lack of food. They were got into multiple conflicts with natives. In fact, the one story is they were about to be sold into slavery or something, and Sacagawea noticed the other tribe that she saw her brother. She hadn't seen her brother in well over a few decades. I mean, at least a decade. She hadn't seen her brother, and that saved them. And then the tribes gave them horses and set them on their way, but their canoe tipped over a bunch of times. It was them, and they had a group of guys that came with them. So you always had mutiny potential, and just the fact that, think to yourself, like, would you and your spouse, or would you and your brother, or your brother-in-law, or your friends, would you guys be willing to travel into the unknown as it is today? You don't know if there's giant spiders. You don't know. I mean, whatever legends that have came through your ears, would you be willing to do that? And I think that's gone in for the most part in the world now. We've plotted all the land. There is no more frontiers, which kind of sucks. And the fact that Lewis and Clark were doing this, it just, the amount of balls it took for these guys to just hop in a canoe and do that. So back to the mountain men. These mountain men would go out there for 6 months, 7 months, and then they would have rendezvous where they would trade in their pelts and get paid and then go back out. But if they were out there and they were shot with an arrow, if they didn't figure it out, they were dead. If they twisted their ankle, if they broke their arm, if they misjudged anything and got injured, it was on them. They didn't have Lunchables in their backpacks, okay? These guys, if they were hungry, they had to figure it out and they had to eat. It's what I call real men, right? Ask yourself, how many real men do you know anymore? There are still some out there, like real men, like these guys that just, there's no pussyfooting around. They're just, if they lived back during the Oregon Trail, they would have took their family there, which brings up the Oregon Trail as well. I mean, the human spirit to want more and to load your family on a wagon, just because you've heard other people doing it. There was no calling people to say, "Hey, how is it over in California? How is it over in Oregon?" You just heard other people were doing it. And what a lot of people don't understand about the Oregon Trail is that, there wasn't shocks built into these wagons. So they would find that walking next to the wagon was much easier than sitting in the wagon because you would just get jarred. And you would had these snake oil salesmen kind of people along the trails selling different routes and stuff, and you had to be past the Sierra Nevada mountains by late spring. And if you weren't, if any of you have ever heard of the Donner Party, that is what happened to them. The Donner Party got trapped in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and they were spent almost an entire winter stuck out there and had to revert to cannibalism. I have had the privilege of touring the area, and it's there's a weird feeling to it. But so you would take your whole family, load it up in these wagons, and just like today, you would probably load your wagons full of a bunch of stuff that you didn't need. And there's still remnants today of if you go to certain rivers, you can see where there used to be stockpile of stuff left by the rivers, because these guys would get to the rivers and they would say, look, we've got to lighten this up. Sorry, babe, but your mother-in-law's curio cabinet, we're getting it's out of here. And they would just leave it sit right next to the river, because they would have to take the axles off, the wheels off, and they would have to float, evenly disperse the weight and float these wagons across the river. It was a huge undertaking, and there was 15 plus rivers they had to get across. Rattlesnake bites. Hollywood makes us think that the natives were attacking them all the time. That was a rare occurrence, but still, it was still a possibility that, you would come across some hostile native peoples. But by then, the natives started kind of knowing where that trail was, roughly, and they kind of stayed away from it. It's romantic to think, like, oh, that would be cool to sleep out in the open sky at nighttime, just back, looking at the stars. Anybody who's played Red Dead Redemption will know, you got your little food truck there, you got campfire. It's a great game, by the way. It takes place in 1800s, and I literally feel like I've lived in the 1800s because of that game. Anyways, disease, if you got injured, gangrene could set in. There was all these. I read a story of I believe he was an 8-year-old boy. He was sitting. Normally they didn't use the Conestoga wagons that we that the average American thinks they did. Them were too big and bulky. They used prairie schooners, which were kind of a smaller, lighter wagon. I think it was 10 by 20, maybe 14 by 20 feet. Not a lot of room. And there was a kid sitting on the edge, and they would usually take oxen because horses were way too expensive. Mules were good, but they were stubborn, and they weren't good for doing certain tasks. Oxen were the overall prize animal to pull these wagons. And there was a boy sitting on the edge, and they hit a real big bump. These weren't paved roads by no means, and it kicked him out of the wagon, and he fell over the wagon, and I believe it was the back left tire ran over his head. And of course, so now you got to stop. The mother parents are devastated, and you end up having to bury your son right there along the trail. There's they mostly started within, like, at St. Louis area, and then they went to Independence Rock, and Independence Rock is cool. There's still signatures there from this time. I've never been, but I'd love to go out there. But some of these people made it, some of these people didn't, and you had the natives were getting a bit hostile during this time because more and more people were coming out west. There was a few mountain men that had been killed by natives, encroaching on their land and stuff, and back to the mountain men. You imagine these guys are living. You're living alone in a place that doesn't want you. Mother Nature is indifferent whether you live or die. Most of the native tribes that you have come across with, that you built trade relationships with, but there are some that were just, if they saw you, you were dead. The Blackfoot or Blackfeet Indians, I think it's Blackfoot. I think it's Blackfoot no matter if there's multiple or not. I don't know. Maybe it is Blackfeet. I don't know. But I have read stories that, that tribe did not play around. They didn't care what you had to trade. They did not like the white man coming close to them. And it was like that from the beginning of that tribe till when I'm sure nowadays the tribe's different, but till they were civilized, as we'd say. Most people have seen that Leonardo DiCaprio movie called Reverence, about Hugh Glass. That was a real story. I mean, that guy was attacked by a bear. That's another thing. The bear population in the western United States compared to what it is now is insanely different. These grizzly bears were the number one concern, and it was a grizzly maze, as you were. Once you started getting past the grasslands of Nebraska and stuff, and started getting into the foothills of the Rockies, you had better be careful on where you go and take a pee, because these grizzly bears, and through time now, because of management and stuff, their sizes, not only their population sizes, but their physical sizes have been tamed down. But back then, there was some of these grizzly bears that were gigantic, and they could outrun you, they could outclimb you. There is nothing you can do versus a grizzly bear. Playing dead, good luck with that. Can you imagine trying to play dead while there's a bear stepping on your back? Hugh Glass was attacked viciously, but it's the best bear attack scene, most accurate bear attack scene I've ever seen is in The Reverence. I would watch it if you haven't seen it. If anything else, just type in Reverence bear attack scene into YouTube and check it out. That's how a bear attack happens. And yes, they do leave, and then yes, they do come back again. It's happened. We have documented testimonials that say that's exactly how it went. And he ended up crawling for many, many miles. The story was, if you don't know, his crew abandoned him. They thought he was, after he got attacked by a bear, they thought he was dead. So they kind of just left him there. They couldn't sit around and wait for him anymore. But they left him for dead. And he crawled. He was mauled by a grizzly bear in South Dakota near Grand River. Suffered severe injuries. Was left for dead. Crawled over 200 miles to Fort Kiowa in 6 weeks. Think about that. The amount of injuries this guy had, and then he had to crawl with no weapon, no gun, no nothing, no knife. He set his own leg. He used maggots to prevent infection. Foraged and got help from Native Americans. And the whole time, he was fueled by revenge. He wanted to kill. I don't want to spoil the ending of the movie, but it just didn't. I'll put it this way: it just didn't work out as well as he planned, right? And he had learned. It was a really good story on how to learn to forgive. He eventually had to learn how to forgive. But he died in the Yellowstone River region in present-day Montana. He was born in 1783, and he died in 1833. So he lived a fairly decent life. A little young for our days. And he died by being killed by Arikara warriors along the Yellowstone River. So he was a symbol of grit, resilience, and survival. This guy lived the West. The West was not to be played with back then. How many of you would be willing to leave your city now, buy a wagon, and take the fam out? I don't know if I would or not. As much as I fantasize about the Wild West, and after these times with the frontiers, eventually we did settle it. The railroad was the Transcontinental Railroad was put in, and then population really boomed out there. And then you start getting Deadwood and Tombstone, and which brings up, I'm going to actually talk about Doc Holliday, one of the men I admire in a weird way on a future DTMS episode. You also got guys like Daniel Boone when you talk about real men. Daniel Boone fell in love with the what is now the state of Kentucky, that area, so much he took it upon himself to basically settle it, and he figured if he could settle it, then the Congress would allow it to become a state. And Boone was born in 1734 in Pennsylvania. He was raised in a Quaker family. He moved to North Carolina. He was a skilled hunter and tracker. when I read about Boone, there's all these times it said, in March, Boone then went to Kentucky. Boone went back home. Boone then traveled to Virginia. When they say traveled, they meant walked, right? They meant walked from North Carolina to Kentucky. He founded Boonesboro, which was basically, picket fence, all made out of timber, just a little fort. And I think there's still in 1775, I think there's still, I don't know if you can tour it still today, but there's still remnants of it. He fought in the Cherokee American Wars. He escaped Shawnee captivity. His son was killed by Native Americans when he was just 16 years old. His daughter was captured by Shawnee when she was 13. Boone himself was captured for a few months until he escaped. And then once he escaped, he ran back to the fort to let everybody know. He was famous during his lifetime as well. Like, people knew of this guy, and he was big, burly kind of dude. Definite real man. He chalk one up for Daniel Boone. He was a symbol of the frontier spirit. I mean, he was just everything I've read about this guy, he was just a good dude, right? Now, the natives might not think that because he was encroaching on some of their ancestral hunting territory. But, you had this guy that just wanted more, And from what I understood of Daniel Boone, he would give you the shirt off his back, And it's a shame what happened later in life with him. He ended up, his love affair with Kentucky, even though, Kentucky should be called Booneland. It should be called Boonesville, whatever. Daniel Boone is the reason Kentucky's a state, hands down. But over some weird state bureaucracy and real estate laws and stuff, he got jaded and kind of got screwed out of what was his, and he ended up dying in Texas, out of all places, later in life. Never went back to Kentucky, but anyways, yeah, I was just thinking, frontiers, man. How cool would it be to go into the unknown again? I don't think it'll ever happen again. Not on our planet. Now, if we ever can colonize a planet, that'll be our next frontier. But again, it's not, yes, you needed money, a few months' salary at least, to hop on the Oregon Trail. But you really didn't. You could throw some stuff together if you wanted to. You could have just walked. You could have just said, later, Ma, and started walking west. Where you can't really do that with space. So, I don't know, just it's how my brain works. Something I think about a lot. I just always thought it was cool. Look into Lewis and Clark, Oregon Trail, Daniel Boone, the Reverence, the movie. Check these things out, man. They're amazing. Survival and really what drives the human spirit, and a huge part of our history of this country. So, I don't know. Thought it was interesting. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is the world of art. You often hear that art is subjective, and whether a guy like Banksy, whether that's art or not, it's all art. I've always felt like, no, it's not. It's not all art. And I'm going to try to make my case for it. So, while nobody can determine what somebody finds or defines art to be, if something moves you, it can be determined to be art or artistic. However, just saying, look, I'll just cut to the chase. Picasso sucks, all right? Pablo Picasso is so overrated. I'm going to put on screen a few of his well-known paintings. And if you look at this painting, I kid you not, I know people that could do this, if not better. Now, much like music, I then have to say, okay, hold on. Put yourself back in this time and see what was done before leading up to Picasso's time versus after. Meaning like the Beatles, right? The Beatles don't sound that revolutionary now, but they did in the 60s. So Picasso did bring something to the art world, you know. I think Cubism is one of his things that he kind of brought, you know. And okay, yes, there's something artistic there. I get it. But the price of his paintings are insane. He's revered in the same sentences as Michelangelo and Raphael, all of the Ninja Turtles. You always hear Picasso mentioned. And it's like, I don't get it. Why? So my argument is this. While you can find art in anything, I define art as, does it hold my attention? Is it cool? Does it grab my attention initially? Does it make me think? Does it make me feel? Can I do it? Right? I much rather, and this is just personally, I'm more astonished at artwork that when I look at it, I cannot do. Like the Statue of David, right? When I first saw that, I was amazed at how large it is. It's huge. It's like 11 feet high or something. It's ginormous. But if you give me a piece of marble, a big block of marble, could I come away with that same thing? The product would not be the same. I may be able to make you some cool stuff, but it ain't going to be like that. I mean, the veins in his feet, and I mean, it was just, it's well done. I mean, it's a lot of time. The Sistine Chapel, could I do that? Laying on my back? Probably not. So look at another one of Picasso's paintings here, and then look at something me and my wife, this one here, the pink one, is something me and my wife did called an acrylic pour, right? What is the difference here? What is the difference here? Well, the difference is $80,000, because that's what Picasso's is worth. So, along with that, I also feel like even, tattoos these days, tattoos are not as taboo as they once were, right? I mean, people are getting face tattoos now. So they're not looked at through the same taboo eyes as they once were, but yet tattoo artists, I don't believe, get the respect they deserve. I would like to call myself an artist. I play music, I paint, I can draw, I can sculpt. And the thought of my canvas being somebody's skin where there's just no room for error, I think there's something to be said about that. And not only that, but these artists, these tattoo artists now are pushing the bounds of how good they're really getting. I have my brother, my oldest younger brother, Kevin. What's up, Kev? He's got a buddy, Brent, that Brett's got a Willie Nelson tattoo on his side. That when I first saw it, I had to touch it. That's how realistic this thing looks. So look at this one. I mean, this is a tattoo. And it's that's art. That is artwork. 90% of the general population cannot do that. Look at this one. I mean, that's great coloring, great shadowing. I mean, it's realistic. And we've all seen the horror stories on Google. Like, we type in, if you Google bad tattoos, there are some really bad ones. Not everybody can do a human face. And as far as drawing, I mean, look at this drawing here. This is amazing. I mean, this drawing is so lifelike. And Ian McKellar British actor, this is not a photograph. This is a drawing done with colored pencils. This is art, right? So I can't argue what is art and what isn't art. On a micro scale, yes, if it moves you, if you looked at a tree, a picture of a crayon drawing of a tree, and there was some weird dove or something on it, and you went to tears, okay, that's art. But is it true art? I would say no, because I can draw you that. So although it's in the eye of the beholder, you know, and going back to Banksy, love him or hate him, Banksy's stuff he puts thought into his stuff. I've seen his stuff, and although I could do it, I could take a stencil and spray paint that easily. The idea in itself is the art with Banksy. It's not what he's drawing, it's why he's drawing it or why he's painting it or tagging it. Some of the stuff I've seen has made me stop and think. I mean, I have saw Banksy artwork and stopped and actually thought about what he's trying to say. And some of it's very interesting. I mean, so just when you get into modern art, in New York City, in Manhattan, there's this sculpture now. Well, it's been there for a while. It's in the financial district, and it's basically a big different animals sitting around it. Not dogs like the famous painting, which I would think that would be art because I can't draw that, or anything by Norman Rockwell. Norman Rockwell, his stuff not only looked good, but it was interesting. I mean, him painting a picture of himself painting, stuff like that is interesting. It's Americana. But this sculpture is just these big bronze animals sitting around a poker table, and you could take pictures with them. Is it art? I mean, it's more amusement than anything. I mean, I don't... Technically, can I sculpt a bronze statue? If you taught me how, I could probably sculpt something better than what I saw. I just don't... You know, when I was in Europe with my grandmother one time, we had the option of going to a modern art museum. And right away, I wanted to pass. But... You know, we went through it, and I'm just looking around like, maybe it's like Frank Zappa or, who else? Bob Dylan, right? Or the Grateful Dead. Maybe it's not for me, so I'm never going to get it because I just don't get it. I don't get why certain shapes and colors splashed on a painting is art. Back in the 60s or early 70s, they had a chimpanzee or an elephant or something that was doing artwork. And, you know, yeah, cool. It's novelty, but yeah, cool. Is that art for an elephant? Yeah, maybe. But is it moving? Does it mean anything? No, it doesn't. It just doesn't. What about somebody like Bob Ross, right? From whom I gotta say, he probably was my biggest influence as far as painting, because I use that same method. But is Bob Ross art? Because he continually just cranks them out, right? There's like 3,800. I read a news story where there's like 3,800 Bob Ross paintings sitting in a storage unit right now. And the person that owns them owns the rights to them, and will never put them out. And because she, you know, I think she's worried that it'll diminish the current Bob Ross valued paintings. To him, it was a method, but I would still say, yeah, it's art, because the general population cannot do that. And even if they could, if everybody could paint a scenic painting like Bob Ross could do, right? Would it still be art? Would that still be continued art? And I would argue probably, maybe, yes, because you are either in a location and you're painting what is being seen at that moment, or it's something from your head. And somebody's still going to look at it and you know, well, if everybody could do it, if everybody could paint a picture just like Bob Ross, human beings we would eventually up the notch in some weird way, like we've done with everything else. We wouldn't just paint regular scenery anymore. We would do it in reverse colors, or we would do it, with cracks in it, or with piercings, or face tattoos. I don't know. But anyways, that's my argument against art. I think art can be looked at and can be determined, yes, this is art, and no, this is crap. And if anybody ever tells you, you can't define art, yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. If anybody ever tells you that, pull out a napkin and hawk a loogie in it, and sprinkle some dirt on it, swirl it around, and hand it to him. He'll look at it for a while. Is that art? That's what I would ask him. Anyways.